I looked out my kitchen window on that freezing January morning in Denver, Colorado, and saw Sharon Patterson from the HOA loading my $2,000 snowblower onto the back of a pickup truck, and my blood immediately started to boil. I hadn't given her permission to touch my property, let alone take it off my driveway where I'd left it after clearing my walkway an hour earlier. I grabbed my coat and rushed outside, the cold air hitting my face like a slap as I ran across my front yard toward the street. "Hey! What the hell are you doing with my equipment?" I shouted, my breath forming clouds in the frigid air. Sharon turned around with that condescending smile she always wore during HOA meetings. She was in her late 40s, with that typical haircut that screamed middle management and entitlement. Her puffy jacket made her look even more ridiculous as she stood there like she owned the place. Well, she thought she did, anyway. "Oh, Andrew, good morning. I'm borrowing your snow machine to clear the community center parking lot. The HOA's equipment broke down, and we have an event this afternoon." I blinked at her, processing what she just said. "You're borrowing it. I don't remember you asking me if you could borrow anything." "Well, I knocked on your door, but you didn't answer." This is an emergency situation, and according to the HOA bylaws, in cases of community emergency, we can utilize available resources. I walked right up to her, stopping just short of the truck bed where my snow blower sat. "That's not how property ownership works, Sharon. You can't just take my stuff without permission. Get it off that truck right now." Her smile faded, replaced by that stern expression she used when she thought she had authority over someone. "Andrew Williams, as the HOA president, I'm making an executive decision for the good of the community. I'll have it back to you by this evening. Don't be so selfish." "Selfish? That's a $2,000 machine I bought with my own money. It's not HOA property. Put it back now." The guy in the truck, some contractor she'd probably hired, looked uncomfortable with the situation. He glanced between us, clearly wanting to stay out of it. "We'll discuss this at the next board meeting," Sharon said, waving her hand dismissively. "Drive on, Miguel." I stepped in front of the truck. "If you drive away with my property, I'm calling the police and reporting it stolen." Sharon laughed, actually laughed. "Don't be ridiculous, it's for community use, you'll get it back." "I'm not joking, Sharon, that's theft. I never gave you permission." She rolled her eyes and pulled out her phone. "Fine. I'm documenting your refusal to cooperate with the HOA during an emergency situation. This will result in a fine, Andrew. A substantial one." I pulled out my own phone and took several pictures of my snow blower on the truck, Sharon standing there, and the license plate. "And I'm documenting you stealing my property. Last chance to put it back." "Miguel, go ahead," she said, stepping aside. I moved with the truck, staying in front of it. The driver, Miguel, looked genuinely worried now. "Lady, I don't want to be part of this. Maybe we should just find another way." "I'm paying you to do a job," Sharon snapped. "Andrew, move out of the way or I'll add obstruction to your list of violations." "Call the cops then," I said, already dialing 911 on my phone. "Because that's what I'm doing right now." The operator answered, and I explained the situation clearly and calmly. A woman was taking my personal property without permission, and I wanted to report it as theft. Sharon's face went red as she realized I was serious. She started talking over me, trying to explain to no one in particular that this was HOA business, that she had authority. The operator told me to stay on the line, and that officers were being dispatched. I gave them my address on Maple Ridge Drive and described the truck. Miguel, hearing this, immediately got out of the driver's seat. "I'm not getting involved in this," he said, holding up his hands. "I just came to clear some snow, not to steal anything." "You're not stealing anything," Sharon insisted. "This is a community matter. Andrew is being unreasonable." "Madam," he called the cops, Miguel said. "I'm not touching that equipment anymore." 2 patrol cars arrived within 15 minutes. During that time, Sharon had tried everything from threatening me with HOA fines to attempting to reason with Miguel to just drive away. I'd stood my ground, keeping my phone recording the entire interaction. Several neighbors had come out to watch, including Tom and Lisa from across the street. Officer Martinez and Officer Jennings approached us, taking in the scene. The snow blower was still visible on the truck bed. "Someone want to explain what's going on here?" Officer Martinez asked. I spoke first. "I'm Andrew Williams. I own this house and that's my personal snow blower on that truck. This woman, Sharon Patterson, took it from my property without my permission. I want to report it as theft." "That's absurd," Sharon interjected. "I'm the president of the Maple Ridge Home Owners Association, and I was borrowing the equipment for community use. This is HOA property by extension." Officer Jennings raised an eyebrow. "Do you have any documentation showing that snow blower belongs to the HOA?" "Well, no, but the bylaws state that in emergencies, we can utilize community resources. Community resources or private property belonging to individual residents?" Officer Martinez asked, pulling out a notepad. "There's no difference in cases of emergency," Sharon insisted. "Madam, that's not how property law works," Officer Martinez said. "Do you have written permission from Mr. Williams to use his equipment?" I knocked on his door. He didn't answer. I left a note. "You most certainly did not leave a note," I said. "And even if you had, that's not permission. That's you informing me after the fact." Officer Martinez looked at me. "Sir, do you have proof of ownership for the equipment?" "Yes, absolutely. I have the receipt in my house. I bought it 3 months ago from Home Depot. I can pull it up right now." "Please do that," he said. I went inside, my heart pounding. Part of me couldn't believe this was happening over a snow blower, but Sharon had crossed a line. The HOA had been a pain since I moved into this neighborhood 2 years ago, but this was outright theft. I found the receipt in my files where I kept all major purchase documentation, printed it out, and also grabbed the manual and warranty card that had my name on them. When I returned, Sharon was in a heated discussion with the officers about HOA authority and community rights. Officer Jennings looked tired already. "Here's the receipt," I said, handing it over. "Purchased November 3rd last year from the Home Depot on Colorado Boulevard." "That's my name, my credit card." Officer Martinez examined it and nodded. "This clearly shows ownership. Mr. Williams, do you want to press charges for theft?" "Absolutely," I said without hesitation. Sharon's face went pale. "You can't be serious. This is vindictive and petty." "I was going to return it." "After using it without permission," I pointed out. "That's still theft. You took something that didn't belong to you." "Madam, I need to see your identification," Officer Jennings said to Sharon. The situation escalated quickly from there. Sharon refused to believe she was actually in trouble, continuing to argue about HOA bylaws and community standards. The officers remained professional but firm. They explained that regardless of HOA rules, personal property was still personal property, and taking it without permission constituted theft under Colorado law. Miguel had already given his statement that Sharon had hired him to help with snow removal and had told him the equipment was available for HOA use. He'd assumed everything was legitimate. The officers let him go after getting his contact information, telling him he wasn't in any trouble since he'd been misled. Sharon was cited for theft, which in Colorado could be a petty offense or a misdemeanor depending on the value. Given that my snow blower was worth $2,000, it fell into the category of Class 2 misdemeanor, as it was less than $2,000 by the receipt, but close enough to warrant serious attention. The officers gave her a court date and explained that I had the right to pursue this legally. "This is insane," Sharon kept saying. "Over a snowblower. You're destroying community unity over a snowblower, Andrew. You destroyed it when you decided you could just take my property," I replied. After the police left and my snowblower was safely back in my garage, I sat in my kitchen with a cup of coffee, trying to process what had just happened. My phone started ringing almost immediately. First, it was Robert Kinney, the HOA vice president. "Andrew, what the hell happened this morning?" "Sharon called me in tears saying you had her arrested." "She wasn't arrested, she was cited for theft. There's a difference." "Over a snowblower. Come on, man. She was trying to help the community by stealing my property." "Robert, how would you feel if I came into your garage and took your lawn mower without asking? That's different." "How?" He sighed heavily. "Look, Sharon sometimes gets overzealous, but her heart is in the right place. Can't you just drop this? Let it go?" "No," I said firmly. "I've let a lot of things go with this HOA. The ridiculous fines for my trash can being visible from the street for more than 12 hours. The violations for having my car parked in my own driveway for 3 days while I was sick. The complaints about my fence being half an inch too tall. I'm done letting things go, Robert. Sharon crossed a legal line this time. You're making a mistake. The board won't forget this. Are you threatening me with HOA retaliation? Because that's also illegal and I'm recording this call." He hung up immediately. Over the next few days, I received several calls and messages from other board members and neighbors. Some supported me, saying Sharon had been out of control for years and needed to face consequences. Others thought I was overreacting and should just accept an apology and move on. I noticed that the people telling me to let it go were typically the ones who benefited from being on Sharon's good side in the HOA. My neighbor Tom came over 3 days after the incident. He was in his 60s, retired from some corporate job, and generally stayed out of HOA drama. "Got a minute?" he asked when I answered the door. "Sure, come in. Want some coffee?" We sat in my living room and he got straight to the point. "I think you did the right thing, Andrew. Sharon has been running this HOA like her personal fiefdom for 5 years now. Someone needed to stand up to her." "Thanks." Not everyone seems to agree. The ones who disagree are either scared of her or benefit from her favoritism. "Did you know she approved a fence for the Hendersons that was 8 inches taller than yours, but she still fined you for being half an inch over?" I hadn't known that. "Seriously?" "Yep." "And the Johnsons down the street wanted to paint their house a different shade of gray, and Sharon rejected it 3 times before finally approving it, just because she was on bad terms with Mrs. Johnson. This has been building for a while. Your situation just brought it to a head." "I'm just tired of the double standards," I admitted. "I pay my HOA fees, I maintain my property, I follow the actual rules, but she acts like she can make up new rules whenever she wants." "Have you thought about getting a lawyer?" Tom asked. "Because Sharon is going to fight this, and the HOA will probably back her with community funds." I hadn't considered that, but it made sense. "You think she'll actually take this to court rather than just accept responsibility?" Tom laughed. "Andrew, Sharon has never accepted responsibility for anything in her life. She'll fight this tooth and nail, and she'll use the HOA treasury to do it." He was right. A week later, I received a letter from an attorney representing Sharon Patterson, arguing that the charges should be dropped because the equipment was taken for legitimate HOA business, and there was no criminal intent. The letter also included a counterclaim that I had caused emotional distress to Sharon and damaged her reputation by involving the police. I immediately contacted a lawyer of my own. His name was James Fletcher, and he specialized in property law and HOA disputes. His office was downtown, in one of those modern buildings with too much glass and not enough character. "This is an interesting case," James said, reviewing the police report and photographs I'd taken. "HOA overreach combined with clear theft. The thing is, the law is very much on your side regarding the theft charge. She took your property without permission. That's textbook theft, regardless of her intentions." "Her lawyer is claiming no criminal intent," I said. "Criminal intent doesn't require malice. It just requires the intentional taking of property known to belong to someone else without permission. She knew it was your snow blower. She took it anyway. That's intent." "What about her counterclaim for emotional distress?" James waved his hand dismissively. "Frivolous. You have the right to report crimes to the police. She experienced consequences for her actions. That's not distress. That's accountability. We'll file a motion to dismiss that immediately." The preliminary hearing was set for 3 weeks later at the Denver County Court. During that time, the HOA held an emergency meeting to discuss the situation. I received notice that they would be voting on whether to use HOA funds to support Sharon's legal defense. I made sure to attend. The meeting was held at the community center, the same one Sharon had wanted to clear the parking lot for. About 40 residents showed up, which was more than usual. Apparently, drama brought people out. Sharon sat at the front table with Robert and 2 other board members, Linda Chen and Marcus Foster. She looked composed, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. When I walked in, several people turned to look at me. Some nodded in support. Others glared. "Let's call this meeting to order," Sharon said, her voice tight. "We're here to discuss the unfortunate situation that occurred earlier this month and to vote on providing legal support for the HOA president in defending against spurious charges." "Spurious," I said loudly from my seat. "You stole my property. Mr. Williams, you're out of order. This is not an open forum." "Actually, according to HOA bylaws, any member can speak during emergency meetings if recognized by the chair," said a woman I didn't know well. Her name was Patricia something. Sharon's jaw clenched. "Fine. Patricia is correct. If you wish to speak, raise your hand and wait to be recognized." I raised my hand immediately. So did about 10 other people. Sharon ignored us and continued. "The board recommends allocating $5,000 for legal defense. This sets a precedent that the board acts in the community's interest and should be protected when making difficult decisions." "That's not what happened," Tom called out without being recognized. "You stole someone's property. That's not a difficult decision. That's a crime." "Order." Sharon snapped. "Tom, you're out of order. So fine me," Tom shot back. "Add it to the collection of ridiculous fines you've been handing out for years." The meeting devolved quickly. It became clear that the neighborhood was deeply divided. Some people genuinely believed Sharon had been trying to help the community and that I was overreacting. Others had been waiting for someone to challenge her authority and were fully behind me. After an hour of heated debate, they called for a vote. The measure to provide legal funds for Sharon passed, but barely. 22 in favor, 18 against. I stood up as soon as the vote concluded. "I want it on record that using community funds to defend someone against criminal charges sets a dangerous precedent," I said. "What happens when the next board member commits an actual crime? Do we fund their defense too?" "This isn't a crime," Sharon insisted. "This is a misunderstanding blown out of proportion. The police didn't think so. The district attorney didn't think so. And when we get to court, the judge won't think so either." I left the meeting after that, furious that my own HOA dues were now going to be used to defend the person who stole from me. James assured me later that this could actually work in our favor, showing a pattern of the HOA enabling bad behavior. The next few weeks were tense. I received 2 more violation notices from the HOA, both for petty things. One claimed my mailbox was crooked and needed to be straightened within 48 hours or face a $50 fine. The other said my outdoor light fixture was not an approved style, despite it being the same fixture that came with the house when I bought it 2 years ago. I documented everything and sent it to James, who added it to our file as evidence of retaliation. He also helped me file a formal complaint with the state's HOA regulatory board about Sharon's behavior and the association's misuse of funds. The preliminary hearing arrived on a cold February morning. I wore a suit and arrived at the courthouse early with James. Sharon was there with her lawyer, a man named Gregory Patton who wore an expensive suit and had that slick look of someone who overcharged and underdelivered. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Judge Rebecca Morrison presided, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and no apparent patience for nonsense. The prosecutor handling the case was a young woman named Sarah Chen from the district attorney's office. She laid out the facts clearly. Sharon Patterson had taken property valued at approximately $2,000 belonging to Andrew Williams without his knowledge or permission. When confronted, she refused to return it immediately and only did so after police intervention. This constituted theft under Colorado Revised Statutes Section 18-4-401. Gregory Patton argued that there was no criminal intent, that Sharon had been acting in her capacity as HOA president to address a community emergency, and that she had every intention of returning the property undamaged. Your Honor, Patton said smoothly, this is a case of a community leader making a judgment call in a time-sensitive situation. The HOA bylaws grant the president certain authorities during emergencies. My client believed in good faith that she had the right to utilize available community resources. Except the snow blower wasn't a community resource, Sarah Chen countered. It was private property belonging to Mr. Williams. The HOA bylaws don't supersede property law or criminal statutes. If I need a car in an emergency, I can't just take my neighbor's vehicle without permission and claim it was necessary. Judge Morrison looked at Sharon. Miss Patterson, did you ask Mr. Williams for permission to use his equipment? I knocked on his door, Your Honor. He didn't answer. That's not what I asked. Did you receive permission? No, but I left a note explaining the situation. Mr. Williams, did you find any note? The judge asked me. No, Your Honor. There was no note on my door, my mailbox, or anywhere else. The judge made a note on her papers. Even if there had been a note, Miss Patterson, that's not permission. That's notification. Do you understand the difference? Your Honor, in my role as HOA president, I have to make difficult decisions for the good of the community. The community center parking lot needed to be cleared for a scheduled event. Our equipment was broken. Mr. Williams had equipment sitting unused in his driveway. I made an executive decision to take someone else's property without asking, Judge Morrison said flatly. That's theft, Miss Patterson, regardless of your title or intentions. The law is clear on this matter. Gregory Patton tried to argue further about community standards and HOA authority, but the judge was having none of it. She ruled that there was sufficient evidence for the case to proceed to trial and set a date for 6 weeks later. Outside the courthouse, Sharon looked rattled. I overheard her telling Gregory that this was supposed to be dismissed, that he'd assured her it wouldn't go to trial. He was trying to calm her down, suggesting they could negotiate a plea deal. James and I grabbed lunch at a diner nearby to discuss strategy. She's going to try to settle, he said. They'll offer to drop everything if you drop the charges. They might throw in the HOA backing off on the violations. I'm not interested in settling, I said. She needs to face actual consequences. I respect that, but understand that taking this to trial means more time, more stress, and more money. Are you prepared for that? I thought about all the times Sharon had abused her position. All the neighbors she'd harassed with petty violations and arbitrary rules. All the people too afraid to stand up to her because they didn't want to deal with the consequences. Yeah, I'm prepared. Over the next several weeks, the neighborhood tension got worse. Someone started a Facebook group called Justice for Sharon, where people posted about how I was destroying the community over a simple misunderstanding. Another group formed called HOA Accountability that supported my stance and shared their own stories of Sharon's abuse of power. My lawyer subpoenaed HOA records showing a pattern of selective enforcement. We found dozens of examples where Sharon had bent or ignored rules for her friends while strictly enforcing them against people she didn't like. We also found financial irregularities, where HOA funds had been spent without proper board approval. This last part caught the attention of the district attorney's office. Sarah Chen contacted James to ask if I'd be willing to provide information about potential HOA fraud and misappropriation of funds. I agreed immediately. What started as a simple theft case was expanding into something bigger. The state's HOA Regulatory Board launched a formal investigation into Maple Ridge HOA's financial practices. An auditor was assigned to review the books for the past 5 years. Sharon started looking desperate. She showed up at my door one evening about 2 weeks before the trial was scheduled to begin. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "Andrew, can we talk?" she asked. She looked tired, older than her years. The stress was clearly getting to her. "I don't think that's a good idea without our lawyers present. Please, just 5 minutes, neighbor to neighbor." Against my better judgment, I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. I wasn't inviting her into my house. "What do you want, Sharon?" "I want to apologize," she said. "I shouldn't have taken your snow blower without asking. I made a mistake. I'm asking you to drop the charges." "You've had weeks to apologize. You hired a lawyer instead and tried to claim you did nothing wrong." "I was advised to do that. I was scared." "Andrew, if this goes to trial, I could have a criminal record. I could lose my job. Is that really what you want?" "What I wanted was for you to respect my property rights. What I wanted was for you to treat everyone in this neighborhood fairly instead of like your personal kingdom. What I wanted was for you to apologize weeks ago and take responsibility. But you didn't do any of that. I'm doing it now. Because you're facing consequences, not because you actually think you did something wrong." She stared at me, and I could see the anger creeping back into her expression despite her efforts to stay calm. "You're really going to ruin my life over this." "I'm not ruining your life, Sharon. You did that yourself when you decided to steal my property and then double down on it instead of admitting you were wrong." "Fine," she snapped, the mask slipping completely. "But don't think this is over. Even if I lose in court, I'm still the HOA president. I still have authority over this neighborhood. You'll regret this, Andrew." "And there it is," I said. "The real Sharon. That threat you just made. My Ring camera caught it. Thanks for making this easier." Her face went pale as she realized what she'd just done. She turned and walked quickly back to her car without another word. I sent the video to James immediately. He was thrilled. "This demonstrates consciousness of guilt and retaliatory intent. The prosecution is going to love this." The trial began on March 23rd. The courthouse was busier this time, and I noticed several of my neighbors had shown up to watch. Some were there to support Sharon, but more than I expected were there to support me. The prosecution presented their case methodically. They showed the receipt proving ownership, the police report documenting the incident, my photographs from that morning, and testimony from Officer Martinez, who had responded to the scene. They played the video from my Ring camera showing Sharon's threatening statement. Sarah Chen was thorough and professional. Members of the jury, this case is straightforward. The defendant took property that did not belong to her without permission from the owner. When confronted, she refused to return it immediately and only did so when police arrived. She then attempted to justify her actions by claiming HOA authority that doesn't exist. The law is clear. Taking someone else's property without permission is theft. The defendant's title, her intentions, her reasoning, none of that matters under the law. What matters is that she knowingly took property belonging to Mr. Williams and refused to return it when asked. That is theft. Gregory Patton's defense focused on Sharon's character and community service. He brought in neighbors who testified that Sharon had always been dedicated to the neighborhood, that she'd organized events and helped maintain property values. He argued that this was an honest mistake made in the heat of the moment during a community emergency. But when Sharon took the stand, things fell apart for her. Sarah Chen's cross-examination was devastating. "Miss Patterson, you testified that you knocked on Mr. Williams' door before taking his snow blower. Is that correct?" "Yes." "What time was this?" "Around 9 in the morning." "And when you didn't get an answer, what did you do?" "I left a note and took the equipment." "Where did you leave this note?" Sharon hesitated. "On his door." Mr. Williams testified he found no note. His Ring camera footage shows no one approaching his door that morning except for the postal worker and a delivery driver. "So I'll ask you again, Miss Patterson, did you actually knock on the door?" "I might have gotten the time confused." "Did you knock on the door at any point before taking the snow blower?" A long pause. "No." "Did you leave a note?" "No." "So you lied under oath moments ago when you said you knocked and left a note." Gregory Patton objected, but the damage was done. The jury had heard Sharon admit to lying on the stand. Sarah continued. "Miss Patterson, you claimed this was a community emergency. What was the nature of this emergency?" "The community center parking lot needed to be cleared for an event." "What kind of event?" "A book club meeting." "A book club meeting. And how many people typically attend this book club?" "About 12. So 12 people gathering for a book club constituted an emergency that justified taking someone else's property without permission. The parking lot was a safety hazard. The community center has a maintenance company on contract, correct?" "Yes." "Did you call them?" "Their equipment was broken." "Did you attempt to rent equipment from any local hardware stores or equipment rental companies?" Sharon didn't answer immediately. "I didn't think of that." "You didn't think to rent equipment, but you thought to take a neighbor's expensive property without asking. Miss Patterson, isn't it true that you have a history of believing HOA authority extends beyond its legal limits?" "I don't know what you mean." Sarah introduced evidence of the HOA violations I'd received, showing the pattern of retaliation. She showed the selective enforcement documented in HOA records. She played the video of Sharon's threat outside my house. By the time the prosecution rested, Sharon looked defeated. The defense tried to recover, but there wasn't much they could do. The facts were the facts. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. They found Sharon Patterson guilty of theft, a Class 2 misdemeanor under Colorado law. Judge Morrison scheduled sentencing for 2 weeks later. Outside the courthouse, Sharon was surrounded by her supporters, many of them crying and outraged. Gregory Patton was already talking about appeals. I felt a strange mixture of relief and exhaustion. James clapped me on the shoulder. "You did it. You held her accountable." "Yeah," I said. I just hope it was worth it. It was. Trust me. The sentencing hearing was almost anticlimactic compared to the trial. Judge Morrison reviewed Sharon's lack of criminal history and her community involvement, but she also emphasized the seriousness of the offense and the abuse of position. Miss Patterson, you held a position of trust within your community. Rather than honoring that trust, you used your position to justify illegal behavior. You took property that didn't belong to you and showed no remorse until you were facing consequences. This court takes such abuses seriously. Sharon was sentenced to 6 months probation, 120 hours of community service, restitution for my legal fees up to $5,000, and a permanent injunction preventing her from holding any HOA board position for 5 years. She was also ordered to attend a class on property law and community governance. It wasn't jail time, but it was significant enough that Sharon broke down crying in the courtroom. Her lawyer helped her to her feet as the judge adjourned, but the consequences for Sharon didn't end there. The HOA board held an emergency vote 3 days after sentencing. With the criminal conviction and the injunction preventing her from serving, they had no choice but to remove her as president. Robert Kinney assumed the position temporarily until elections could be held. The audit of HOA finances uncovered additional problems. Sharon had approved several expenditures without board votes, including the $5,000 for her legal defense. She'd also hired her sister's landscaping company for HOA work at rates well above market value, constituting a conflict of interest. The state regulatory board fined the HOA $15,000 and required a complete financial restructuring. Sharon's employer, a property management company, terminated her employment when they learned of the conviction. She'd been working as a senior property manager, and a theft conviction made her unemployable in that field. I actually felt a little bad about how completely everything had fallen apart for her, but Tom reminded me that actions have consequences, and Sharon had brought this entirely on herself. The HOA held new elections in May. Tom ran for president on a platform of transparency and accountability. He won easily. Patricia, the woman who'd spoken up at that emergency meeting, won a board seat. So did 2 other reform-minded candidates. One of their first acts was to review and revise the HOA bylaws, eliminating many of the ridiculous rules Sharon had implemented over the years. The fence height rule was adjusted to be more reasonable. The restrictions on parking were loosened. The violation fine system was reformed to require board approval for any fine over $25. They also implemented a new rule requiring board members to recuse themselves from any decision involving their personal property or potential conflicts of interest. Any expenditure over $1,000 required a full board vote with documentation. The neighborhood gradually calmed down. The Facebook groups merged into one community group focused on constructive discussion rather than drama. People who'd been afraid to speak up during Sharon's reign started attending meetings and getting involved. I ran into Sharon once, about 3 months after everything concluded. It was at the grocery store on a Sunday morning. We were in the produce section and we both saw each other at the same time. For a moment, I thought she might just turn around and leave. Instead, she walked over to me. "Andrew," she said quietly. "Sharon, I wanted you to know that I've been in therapy, working through some things. My therapist helped me understand that I was using the HOA as a way to feel in control of my life when everything else felt chaotic. That doesn't excuse what I did, but it helps me understand it." I didn't know what to say. "Okay, you were right to press charges. I was wrong. I'm genuinely sorry for everything." This was different from her apology outside my house. This felt real. "I appreciate you saying that. I'm moving, she added, to Boulder, fresh start. The neighborhood has made it clear I'm not welcome here anymore, and honestly, I don't blame them. That's probably for the best. She nodded and started to walk away, then turned back. For what it's worth, Tom is doing a good job as president. The neighborhood is better off. Then she was gone, pushing her cart toward the checkout lanes. I thought about that encounter a lot over the next few days. I didn't regret pressing charges. Sharon had needed to face consequences for her actions. But I could acknowledge that the situation had spiraled into something bigger than either of us had anticipated. A stolen snow blower had led to criminal charges, a conviction, a complete HOA restructuring, and Sharon losing her job and moving away from the neighborhood. Tom came over one evening with beers, and we sat on my back patio enjoying the warm June weather. "You know you're a legend in the neighborhood now, right?" he said, grinning. "Andrew Williams, the man who took down the HOA dictator." I laughed. "I just wanted my snow blower back." "Yeah, but you stood up when no one else would. That matters. Sharon had been bullying people for years. You showed everyone that even the HOA president isn't above the law." "How are things going with the board?" "Good. Really good, actually. We're running the HOA the way it's supposed to be run. Maintaining common areas, enforcing reasonable rules fairly, keeping people informed. Novel concepts, apparently. Any pushback from Sharon's supporters? Some at first, but most people have come around once they realized how much better things could be. We actually had someone thank me last week for not fining them when their trash can was visible for an extra day because they were in the hospital. Can you imagine? They were thanking me for basic human decency. We drank our beers and watched the sun set over the mountains. My snow blower sat in my garage, unused since March because the snow season had ended. It would be ready for next winter, and I was confident that no one would be taking it without permission again. The following November, just as snow season was starting again, I received a formal letter from the HOA. For a moment, my heart sank, wondering if old patterns were returning. But when I opened it, I found something completely different. "Dear Mr. Williams, the Maple Ridge HOA Board of Directors wishes to formally thank you for your actions in holding previous leadership accountable and helping to transform our community governance. Your willingness to stand up for property rights and the rule of law has made our neighborhood a better place for everyone. In recognition of your courage and community service, we are presenting you with this year's Outstanding Resident Award. Additionally, we would like to invite you to join the Architectural Review Committee if you are interested in helping shape reasonable policies for our neighborhood moving forward. Please let us know if you would be willing to serve. With gratitude, Tom Kinney, HOA President." I called Tom immediately. "An award? Really?" he laughed. "The board voted unanimously. You earned it, Andrew, and we really could use someone with your perspective on the Architectural Review Committee. Someone who understands that rules should serve the community, not the other way around." I agreed to join the committee. It felt good to be part of something constructive rather than just fighting against something destructive. That first winter under the new HOA leadership, I used my snow blower regularly without anyone trying to take it. I even volunteered to help clear the community center parking lot when they had a legitimate need. They offered to pay me, but I declined. This was what community service actually looked like, people helping each other willingly, not one person forcing others to comply with arbitrary demands. The entire experience taught me several important lessons. First, sometimes standing up for yourself requires being willing to face conflict and criticism. Half the neighborhood thought I was vindictive and petty when I pressed charges, but I knew I was right, and I stuck to my principles. Second, Institutions like HOAs are only as good as the people running them. Sharon had turned ours into a tool for personal power. Tom and the new board transformed it into an actual community service organization. Same bylaws, same structure, completely different outcomes. Third, accountability matters. If I just let Sharon take my snow blower that morning, if I'd backed down when she claimed HOA authority, she would have continued abusing her position. Other people would have continued suffering under her arbitrary rules. Sometimes the right thing to do is also the hardest thing to do. Looking back now, the whole situation seems almost surreal. A dispute over a snow blower led to criminal charges, a trial, a conviction, and the complete reformation of our HOA. It changed my neighborhood and in some ways changed me. I learned that I could stand up to institutional pressure. I learned that the law does protect individuals even against organizations. I learned that other people were waiting for someone to take that first stand. Sharon learned her own lessons, hopefully. The therapy she mentioned suggested she was trying to grow from the experience. I genuinely hoped she was doing better in Boulder and had found healthier ways to channel her need for control. The snow blower itself, the object that started everything, continued to work perfectly. I took good care of it, maintaining it properly and storing it correctly. It became something of a symbol in the neighborhood. People would joke about it being the most famous snow blower in Denver, the machine that brought down an HOA president. I considered it a reminder that property rights matter, that personal responsibility matters, and that no title or position puts someone above the law. Whether you're the HOA president or just a regular homeowner, you have to respect other people's rights and property. It's a simple concept, but apparently one that needed to be reinforced through the criminal justice system. The Maple Ridge HOA is thriving now under proper leadership. Property values have actually increased since the reforms were implemented, contrary to Sharon's claims that strict enforcement was necessary to maintain the neighborhood standards. Turns out people prefer living in communities where they're treated fairly and respectfully, rather than being constantly monitored and fined for minor violations. Tom served as president for 2 years before stepping down, having accomplished his goal of reforming the organization. Patricia took over after him and has continued the policies of transparency and reasonable governance. I served on the Architectural Review Committee for 3 years, helping to approve dozens of requests that would have been denied under Sharon's leadership. The whole experience reinforced my belief that systems work when people make them work. An HOA can be a valuable community organization or an oppressive bureaucracy, depending entirely on how it's run. Laws can protect citizens or be ignored, depending on whether people are willing to stand up for their rights. Justice can prevail, but only if people are willing to pursue it even when it's difficult and unpopular. I sometimes wonder what would have happened if I just let Sharon take the snow blower that morning. Would she still be HOA president, still bullying neighbors, still abusing her position? Probably. Would the neighborhood have ever reformed its governance? Unlikely. Would someone else have eventually stood up to her? Maybe, but maybe not. The simplest answer is that I'll never know because I made the choice I made. I saw someone taking my property without permission, and I refused to accept it. Everything that followed came from that one decision to stand up for myself and insist on accountability. As I write this, it's been nearly 2 years since that cold January morning when I looked out my window and saw Sharon loading my snow blower onto a truck. 2 years since I called the police and started a chain of events that changed my entire neighborhood. The snow blower still works perfectly. The neighborhood is better than ever, And I learned that sometimes the smallest acts of standing up for yourself can have the biggest consequences. Would I do it again? Absolutely. Not because I wanted to destroy Sharon's life or cause all the upheaval that followed, but because property rights matter, personal accountability matters, and no one should be able to hide behind organizational authority to justify illegal behavior. Those principles are worth fighting for, even if it's just over a snow blower.